The world's oceans are too wide to be sailed alone. Indonesian President Joko Widodo said this at the opening ceremony of the 43rd Summit of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. With 10 countries and over 650 million people, ASEAN is the world's fifth largest economic bloc. Widodo likened ASEAN to a ship and called for all ASEAN members and partners to unite to address global challenges. Now, the summit and related summits formally kicked off on Tuesday in Jakarta, Indonesia. Leaders from 22 countries and 9 international organizations are attending the 3-day event, making it the largest of its kind ever. Prior to the summit's commencement, President Widodo said there are plenty of agendas, but the focus is on the economy. At the invitation of President Widodo, Chinese Premier Chang is participating in the China-ASEAN Summit, the ASEAN Plus 3 Summit, and the East Asia Summit while paying a state visit to Indonesia. So how can regional countries work together to add some spices to global economic recovery? I'm pleased to be joined from Beijing by Professor Yang Yue, Deputy Director of the Institute of Asian Studies at China Foreign Affairs University, and from Kuala Lumpur, capital of Malaysia, by Dr. Peter Chang, Deputy Director of the Institute of China Studies at the University of Malaya. Welcome to the both of you to this edition of The Point. So right now we're looking at two pictures. One is the larger one. For instance, IMF managing director called the global economy being at a difficult and uncertain time. While Indonesian President Widodo said the ASEAN's direction is clearly the epicentrum of growth, and ASEAN has great capital to achieve it. So I want to start with Dr. Chen, if I may. Does he imply that ASEAN is better off than other group of economies to face the uncertainty and decline? What capital does he specifically mean?
The theme that President Jokowi gave to this summit says it all. ASEAN matters. It's the epicentrum of growth. It's a theme of optimism. There is a lot of possibilities that we see that is happening in ASEAN itself. And we are just coming up 2 years in post-COVID, and that's a lot of momentum going up, heading our way. And we feel that this is the moment. This is the moment that ASEAN continues to be critical, not only for ourselves, also for the wider region and the global economy.
Professor Yang, share with us the thoughts that China has about ASEAN, because obviously China attaches a lot of importance to ASEAN. We are each other's biggest trading partner. Bilateral trade is about to exceed $1 trillion US. That is almost double the amount of the trade between United States with ASEAN, the current level. So exactly what does ASEAN mean to China, and what does China mean to ASEAN?
Right. As you said, we have very close economic and trade ties. And if you look at the economic performance of this region, especially Southeast Asia, is the fastest growth region in the world. And according to the World Bank projection for this year, and many Southeast Asian countries are expected to still grow at very fast speed. But they still face some problems, like development gap. I think it's a big problem facing ASEAN countries that we need work together on this. I think China has already done a lot to work together with Southeast Asia countries to narrow the development gap. And also epicentrum of growth, as you just mentioned, is one of very important pillars. Indonesia, as ASEAN chair, proposed this year. So I think they have great resources or capital to realize this because all Southeast Asian countries prioritize the development. So that demonstrates, I think, the strong commitment of ASEAN leaders to develop, to promote economic development. And also the enabling regional economic cooperation environment, I think, built together by China and other regional countries is the second one. So this enabling regional economic environment, including like RCEP, right, and also the new dual circulation development pattern launched by China, I think both can inject new vigor to regional economic integration and also under the leadership of
let
Indonesia.
me interrupt you there, because if you read the international media, there's not much that's been said about ASEAN, despite the U.S. pledge to pay more attention to ASEAN. And I want to ask this question to Dr. Chang, probably. The question is still being asked, what is ASEAN? Why is ASEAN emphasizing this word centrality? Does ASEAN matter to the Western world, if I can borrow this term? Does ASEAN matter for global economic recovery?
ASEAN matters to the USA. U.S. Sanction against China and the friendshoring or the offshoring that is happening right now. A lot of the supply chain has moved to Southeast Asia. Vietnam, for example, has benefited a great deal from it. Malaysia has also, in some ways, benefited from this as well. So America realized that Southeast Asia, ASEAN, remains a critical part of the sort of economic or trade sort of rivalry with China. So I think ASEAN remains very critical for both of the superpowers. We are we are engaging both. We want to be part of this global trade.
Sorry for interrupting. I mean, yeah, ASEAN doesn't want to be used as some kind of arena for great power competition. By the way, China doesn't consider itself a superpower, but it seems that the United States is talking about taking ASEAN seriously, but not really paying attention to it. For instance, Vice President Harris is attending the summit. President Biden is not attending, but he will be going to the G20 summit in India, and then he will visit Vietnam just days apart. Why not coming to the ASEAN summit if the U.S. is really committed to ASEAN?
Same can be said. President Xi is not coming to the ASEAN summit either. And he is not going to the G20 summit either. So I think regardless of what leadership that is going to be present at the ASEAN summit, I think ASEAN feels that it is still a very critical component of this global trade sort of supply chain, and we will continue to play a constructive role. We want to be engaging both China and America economically.
Well, let's focus a little bit more on what Professor Yang was talking about, basically version 3 of China-ASEAN Free Trade Agreement. There has been negotiations of promoting that, taking that to a higher level. Can we expect a breakthrough? If so, what difference would that make to the regional economies and possibly beyond?
It will make a great deal of difference.
This is a question for Professor Yang.
Okay.
All right. So 3.0 version, actually, this initiative proposed in 2021 by President Xi, a special summit to commemorate the 30th anniversary of ASEAN-China dialogue relations. And as we can see, it proceeds very fast. Negotiations already start. And 1.0 version focused on zero tariff, covered 90% tax items of both sides, and 2.0 further opened up market access to both parties. I think the 3.0 actively echoes the development needs of regional countries, especially ASEAN members, and also follow the trend of regional economic development. And also if we see the proposal, the draft of 3.0 version is mainly based on the current needs and future direction of ASEAN-China cooperation and focusing on digital economy and green economy, so that both by innovation and sustainable development. I think it will further facilitate bilateral trade and investment. So we'll see much shorter negative list and more open market. And this is an inevitable result of close economic and trade ties between each other.
Is that what Premier Lee was talking about as to further high-level cooperation in areas such as digital economy, biomedicine, and and there's other areas in this regard. What exactly does China mean higher level, higher quality cooperation, Professor Yang?
Yeah, this is what China pushes forward in recent years, especially high quality development of BRI cooperation, and also push forward some principles and also warmly echoed by ASEAN members and endorsed by ASEAN members. I think what Premier Li Chang mentioned when talking about the relations between China and Indonesia, I think those sectors are priorities of both countries' development strategy. So he mentioned that I think shows the willingness of China to deepen the synergy of bilateral development strategies and further expand cooperation in these sectors. As you mentioned, AI or digital economy and biomedicine, and
right.
also clean energy, right? There are also very solid foundation right now in cooperation on these sectors. So it could help, I think the bilateral cooperation could help both seize the opportunities offered by Industry 4.0 and also could help both to rise up to the challenges brought up by digital age.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Dr. Chang, my final question, what do you expect to come out of this year's summits concretely that will make an impact in a near future for the regional economies?
I think coming up from this will be, again, China's sort of reiterating its commitment to ASEAN, following what Professor Yang has said, or the question that you posed early on. High quality development is the one that we are looking at. We are looking at digital BRI, public health. Health Silk Road is the other thing that we would like to see being promoted. Green BRI, sustainable BRI, things like the EV, electrical vehicles, solar panels, and things like that. That will help us to move to the next stage of development.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Many thanks to Professor Yang Yue, Deputy Director of the Institute of Asian Studies at China Foreign Affairs University, and Dr. Peter Chang, Deputy Director of the Institute of China Studies at the University of Malaya. When we come back, Qinghai Province in northwest China is known as the water tower of China, even of Southeastern Asia. How to keep the water there clean? I spoke with the head of a local NGO when we come back.